This is the Coordination Tax, a podcast about what actually breaks down when teams stop sharing the same reality. I'm Christian Luoma, co-founder at In Parallel, and every episode I sit down with somebody who's lived through a mess of keeping organizations aligned. I have a great guest today, Greg Denison. He runs growth for Pat Lencioni and the Table Group, co-owns a flower company with his wife, and spends his days helping founders through the stage of what he calls getting organized. When the systems that got you there won't stop, no longer work. Greg, welcome to the show.
Man, Christian, I'm so glad to be here. Yeah, thanks for having me.
There's a moment in every company's life when execution now can no longer run through one person's brain. When founder stops being the engine and starts being the bottleneck. I suppose you've seen a couple of those cases. What happens next typically?
Man, so I've been a founder. I guess I'm technically a founder now of a consulting company and helping my wife as a founder with her floral design business. And the first thing that comes to mind is honestly just overwhelm, where you're like, I know this business works. I know I've started something that's meaningful and I'm at 110% capacity and I can see a path to get from here to there. And how am I going to get us there? Like I'm already the bottleneck. Right. And how am I getting more people aligned? That's more time and energy and talent, like getting things clear enough to where someone can own it and run with it. And so it's a blend of like insecurity that happens typically and a blend of overwhelm, but also excitement because you're like, I remember when this thing didn't exist and now it exists and I feel like it could actually work. And how am I ever going to get there? And there's all this whole new set of problems to solve that for me has made me feel overwhelmed. And I feel like I observe that in my founder clients often. And it's a really fun problem to tackle, but a really unique one that's different than what a lot of people talk about, I think, in the kind of the entrepreneurial journey.
For sure. And then it's an interesting one because like on the other side, there's a whole set of other coordination tax related problems where, things don't easily, get easier necessarily by handing over the power. However, if you don't, then there's a whole set of other problems. So what do you mean by getting organized?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think about this stage. So there's this book I love called Managing Transitions by someone named William Bridges. And that's a technical term he uses when he describes there's so many of these models, and I like a lot of them. But his model for life stages of organizations says you start by dreaming a dream, and then you launch a venture, and then the next stage is you get organized, and that's the stage that happens before you make it and become an institution. And then he would either say you go through a cycle of renewal where you dream new dreams and relaunch new ventures, or you die. Is like the life cycles of organizations. And getting organized is this unique stage where the venture's launched, and I think you've done a lot of good work to throw a lot of stuff against the wall and see what sticks. And that's kind of the playbook for launching a venture. And a lot of founders are really good at that one. And that's why they're attracted to this launching a business entrepreneurial journey thing. But getting organized is really where I think you shift from answering the question, do we have a viable product, to do we have a viable business? And that's now the question you have to answer. And a lot of that under founder is a totally different playbook. And it's about how do you get yourself actually more out of the business to where you're less essential and this thing can live and grow and exist beyond you. Not so that you fire yourself for any of those things, although that happens sometimes, but really so that you can continue to do what you're best at, but the business isn't as reliant on you and your strengths and talents and time and energy. And so I think it's clarifying things so other people can own them and run them in a way that you don't have to be in the room. I think it's a lot of times pulling out of a founder's brain and out of the data too, like what's stuck against the wall so that we can do more of that instead of let's throw more stuff against the wall, which can be a hard, even emotional transition for a founder to make of, success now is actually less new stuff against the wall. And I like throwing stuff against the wall. And so how do I cope with that as a founder? So there's a whole set of problems there. But I think getting organized is really shifting to answer the question, do we have a viable business?
That reminds me of another book that I love, which is Running Lean by Ash Maurya, like one of the authors on the lean startup movement. And he's been giving a narrative of factory. That's essentially what you're kind of describing. Like if you can step away from the factory that delivers customer value, then you've sort of made it. Now, you use a term of execution infrastructure that doesn't depend on one person. What does it look like on a Monday morning? What's an execution infrastructure that a founder can step away from?
Man, I think before Monday starts, the clarity that the team needs to drive the business forward has been established. And so you're not waking up Monday thinking, oh, I get what the business does now. And I now rally all these people around what is the right now opportunity or we're trying to seize or problem we're trying to solve. You've clarified what are the problems that we want to solve right now and what are the opportunities we're trying to seize so that the team and your business actually wakes up and you wake up as a founder on Monday already knowing 80% of what's going to happen this week that's going to move the business forward. And that's a very different experience that founders have. But when you get to the other side of this transition, what you experience when you wake up Monday that way is, man, this week in the business success doesn't depend on do I have a good day or a good week this week. I actually think I'm less essential than these other people around me in my own business. And what a relief that is when I've experienced that, when I had an executive team for the first time when I was a CEO or with a consulting business now is on a way smaller scale. I had 50 employees before. Now I've got one and different contractors. But it's still the same experience as we kind of know what this consulting business does of when Kelsey and I sync up here in about an hour, we're not asking the questions like, what is the business doing this week? We're just syncing up on how do we remove the little obstacles that might be in the way today of driving the business to where we already know it should go.
Well said. One of the terms that you use related to getting organized is the team cohesion, which obviously ties into the works of Pat Lencioni, I assume. He famously wrote about the 5 dysfunctions of a team, starting with the trust. How do you model that sort of like pyramid of 5 dysfunctions and the opposite of that compared to having an execution infrastructure that runs?
Man, it's so good. I think about it as one of the anchors, like the most high functioning, even highly efficient as an aspect of high functioning teams are ones that are really cohesive. And that is those 5 things that Pat defined. Like Pat has been one of my favorite people to read, and he's been one of my favorite people to work with by far in my whole life. And part of that is because not only is he a great person, but he really has this ability to take what is a nebulous problem that people have been trying to tackle for a long time and put it inside of a framework and a lens that you're like, how can you define a cohesive team or a high functioning team in 5 areas? But then he does it and you're like, yeah, that kind of makes sense actually. And so I think about that as an anchor I lay with all of my clients of we're going to build a cohesive team here. And then we're going to use technology as much as we can to automate things, to make things more efficient. We're going to change our meeting structures. There's so many things that can change in the business, but we're going to make sure that on the basis of all of that, we're operating with high trust that's vulnerability based. We're not afraid to have conflict. In fact, if we're not having conflict, we see that as much as a red flag of having personal conflict where we're launching personal attacks. Those are both ends of a bad spectrum. We want to be in the sweet spot of not at all afraid of conflict. That's going to drive commitment, and we're going to hold each other accountable, all to the point of getting results. That's the 5 dysfunctions model. And so when you lay that anchor in, as a building block, there's so many things that can happen that aren't related to how much time are we in meetings. There's so many things that can happen for the business where you can automate systems and get more efficient. But I always encourage my founders to shift when they're getting into this concept of, do I have a viable business? One of the main anchors they need is, do I have a cohesive executive team? Are we exhibiting those 5 functions in any interaction that we're here? Because if we're not, you know that you're wasting time and energy, and you really are at risk of this thing, no matter how good your product is. I've seen a lot of businesses, and this sucks when a good business that has a good product folds or doesn't reach its potential because people can't function together. You're like, if we're going to do anything, we're going to do that right, because it's hard enough to get a good business and a good product that, is fitting a market in the midst of competition as fast as things are moving and changing. We're going to make sure we get cohesion right if we get anything right.
That's so well said. I want to double down on that because that's kind of like the crux of coordination of trust. And I believe in the Pat's model and what you're describing as well. Honesty and being grounded, like that's what I'm hearing, the tone's true. I had a previous guest, James Fielding, author of All Pride, No Ego. He swears by the honesty principle for his leadership methods. And another author from Europe, Jerome Krijn-Brink, who recently crafted a methodology he calls Through the Pit, which is all about like finding honesty. Is it really that like coming into terms of reality is the secret sauce for uncovering the growth?
Oh my gosh. And it's amazing how freeing it is. It feels so scary. So I was doing an offsite
Yeah.
for a university here in the States. I'll do another one in a couple of weeks with them, with their enrollment division. And the last exercise we did this exercise where all 13 people, you have to write down something for every person around the table that they need to stop doing, to start doing, and to keep doing. And the level of stress in this room was so high because I was pushing them. We're going to be honest with each other, and you might not have enough context or information to feel good about what you're about to tell them to stop doing. You don't report to these people. There's one boss in here, and all 13 people technically align and report to them. And so you're giving someone feedback that doesn't report to you. You don't report to them. And these people had worked together for a long time, and I was getting real pushback on, I don't know if I know enough to do this, do that. And it was such a freeing exercise because it invited them to this place of honesty is actually freeing when we do it. And you don't have to be right, but you can be honest at every point in time. And that's actually when we enjoy work the most. And it's an essential ingredient. Man, the amount of waste I see and frustration that builds inside of teams when they build systems instead of just inviting themselves into honesty, and they say, oh, if I can't get feedback, we're going to have one boss for 4 people. And now I have to hub and spoke is what we call it. Go to this boss to tell this person something. And then in the next meeting, we're building this whole new accountability system just because someone didn't turn in their work on time. And someone should have just gone to that person and said, hey, what happened today? Like we said, this was the due date. Why did we miss it? And here's what happens when we miss it. And we could have saved all of that infrastructure that we built just with honesty and spent more time on infrastructure that needed to get built and systems that needed to get built. And so, man, if there's one thing that lowers frustration and boosts effectiveness and results inside of teams that I see more than anything, and it's often one of the things that's lacking the most, it's the freedom and the ability of these people to be honest with each other, whether they're right or wrong, and actually be a trust building joy building experience as opposed to something that is tearing us down as a team.
It's completely crazy, but like founders, as you know, as one to another, like we have this tendency of having to be strong in the face of customers and future investors and what have you. So is that the reason why we are sort of like taking that deception and sort of like trying to apply it for inwards facing? Like, how what are the exercises concretely that we founders or you help founders to overcome this problem?
Man, it's such a good question. I'll speak to like my own experience. I remember, so I was building this business and it was starting to get successful, and we had the budget and we had the reason and all the stuff to hire a true executive team for the first time. And so I promoted and hired different people that all of a sudden I realized I had this big insecurity that was building in me because I realized like all these people are better at their functions than I am.
The classic imposter syndrome.
Exactly. How am I supposed to lead these people? Like, how do I lead a CFO that is an actual, has a master's degree? How do I lead the COO that's twice my age and has an MBA? And how do I lead this marketing person, which is some of my background, that honestly has done way bigger projects? And I can't believe she said yes to even being around this table with us. And now I'm supposed to be the boss. So I was spending a lot of time and effort trying to get to where I felt confident or comfortable. And I was honestly putting a face out there, building a facade of charisma or of confidence or whatever it was. And then something flipped for me where I think it was just a stress building situation where I was like, I can't keep living this way. So how do I live different? And I realized I'm not here as the technical boss of this team to be better than any of these people at any function. Like, I'm actually here to ask the right question and for us to gather the right information and then to make a call when a call has to be made and to be the person that's willing to live with the results of that call. And so it really is like, for lack of a better term, a servant-oriented position.
Yeah.
And when I do that and I flip the switch of, oh, my job's not to be better than anyone. My job's actually to help these people be the best that they can. And that's going to make my life easier and all of our lives easier. So for me, the shift was like that changed everything for me. So for me, the shift was a shift in goal of my career and my job is no longer defined by how successful am I, how talented or effective am I. Now my job and actually definition of success is how aligned and cohesive and effective are these people. And the more effective and the closer they are to achieving their unique potential, then I get to define my success lost by that. And that became, at first, it was a loss I had to grieve, where I'm like, I don't get to be the rock star anymore here. That's not the point. And then it was the most freeing shift that I think actually led me into consulting of now I don't have any authority or responsibility to do anything. I don't have any keys. I'm in the back seat of every car that I'm in because I'm working with founders and people driving their own companies, and I'm giving them, facilitating and consulting and all this stuff. And in doing that, it is such, I think the first real thing is redefining success and having so much more fun by success not being what you can achieve as an individual, but redefining it by how many people you can help reach their own unique potential.
Amazing. And with your own background, like I'm sure that advice resonates. But when you see a new team, new founder, and the situation that they deal with, what are some of the diagnostics that you see first that okay, it's time to get organized?
Oh man, it's a great thing. I think you have to have product market fit. I think it's always good working on cohesive teams. I think it's always good building some clarity. When people don't have product market fit yet, and that's the question they're asking, I try to help them actually do as much duct tape solutions as possible and put as much as what I would call in pencil instead of pen as possible of clarity, because you just don't know. And you'll end up wasting a lot of time. If you spend $50,000 on a 2-day offsite that's all about, honestly, as much as I love these people, like building cohesive teams, but you don't have product market fit, you should probably have saved those dollars and spent those 2 days working on making sure that you actually had a viable product first, and building enough clarity to test that out. And so it's, to me, when you see the data, and then honestly, I really double down on intuition of founders and their teams as long as they're self-aware. If people can be self-aware about themselves and their business, something inside of you will resonate when you start to see external factors tell you, oh man, I think this actually works. Like the first time I had founders and leaders coming back to me and repeating back to me the problems that I was helping them solve and that they were meaningful for them and this is helpful in changing the trajectory of their business. That's when I thought, oh man, I think this consulting business actually might be a thing that could work and help people. And only then, I think, do you step forward into the space of getting organized. And until then, you really should stay in that sort of throw a lot of stuff against the wall and keep playing with the product and trying to get some early results back and tweak what you do to an opportunity or to a problem around you, kind of stay nimble. So I think stay in that launching a venture space until the venture, something proves to you that a venture is successful and can be successful. And then the hard shift to changing about 80% of your playbook. And this is where a lot of businesses fail, is it's a pretty hard pivot from launching a venture to getting organized. And it is usually what businesses and founders do is they bump up against the reality of needing to do that for years until they get frustrated enough that they realize, oh man, we are now solving a whole set of problems and they need to make that switch. But not until the product is viable, I would say.
Yeah, that's well said. You can waste enormous amount of resources trying to make something systematic before it needs to be. And then that becomes really, really painful. But let's talk about the point in time when the business is viable and you need to start to handle that operation. One of the models in the Lencioni thesis is that having productive conflicts can be a feature, not a bug. I'm sure you get into these situations that you need to facilitate a productive conflict. Maybe one that is about the truth that everybody knows that nobody has been speaking about for months and months. How does a team go from not speaking about the real things to having productive conflicts?
Man, it's such a great question. So I think about it as first kind of I like frameworks like Pat's for this reason of it creates a point that everyone can look to and say, yes, we agree with that, regardless of our current situation. And I think I love facilitating and working with teams for that reason. One of those things saying, hey, we're going to put up, conflict. There's this pendulum of, I would say, artificial harmony to the conflict continuum of artificial harmony to launching personalized attacks. Can we talk about what happens when we're in a state of artificial harmony? Why does that suck for us and for the business? Can we talk about why it sucks when we are launching personalized attacks and agree that we're going to set the decision point right now that we want to be in the sweet spot in between those two things? And everyone can get to the place of, I actually think that conflict is necessary and good. And it's a problem if we're having the wrong kinds. And it's a problem where we're having none of it because it shows up somewhere, and it shows up in way worse ways when it doesn't happen in an effective way. And then I think about laying the anchor of, okay, if we're going to do that, then what does good conflict look like? And so we use this exercise actually that helps people identify conflict norms and actually helps them map some of their personal experience with conflict. I did this exercise with a team the other day, and one of the things that came up from this, there's a lot, I try to stay away from kumbaya kind of stuff in consulting, but every now and then something comes up that's helpful. And in the context of this, we were mapping some of these things out, and she kind of self-identified in the process that she grew up with a house of addicts, and conflict was really scary. And it creates a visceral reaction in her whenever it occurs. And so she does everything she can to ensure that conflict doesn't take place. And she identified that that's kind of the root cause for her of why she has a hard time doing this. But then also identified that's something that she wants to work on, and made an invitation for her peers to help her invite herself into that process. And so some of that's actually really essential. We don't lose who we've been in our lived experiences when we show up to work every day as much as we might try to compartmentalize it. So there's sometimes aspects like that, but a lot of it is redefining. The big anchor that we lay with teams is good conflict is if we're fighting about what's right for the company. Bad conflict is if we're fighting about who's right. As soon as we get into a conversation around who's right about this or that, it's bad. I don't care how personalized it is. I don't care if we're cussing. I don't care if we're storming out of rooms. If we're talking about what's right for the company passionately, I'm going to actually call that good conflict. And let's get passionate. Let's get honest. Let's care about this work that we're doing. And when you see high-performing teams do this well, they get in fights about what's right for what they're trying to achieve, because it affects all of them when they make the wrong decision and when they take the wrong steps or don't show up in the right ways. And I think high-performing teams do that. And that's actually safe and good. And so,
and being able to frame the conversations or conflicts around things like customer value or something objective and external to the team, and then it doesn't feel like it's the people in the room that are fighting the opinions are.
Exactly. It's not about who's right. Just because you're in charge of finance or just because you're in charge of marketing, there's a reason for that. That means that's your expertise. We should pay attention to that. We should pay attention to making sure that people are implementing decisions that ideally they feel are things that make sense to them so that they can run that forward as much as possible. But at the same time, one of the first exercises we do, especially with executive teams, is when you get around that table, you take your position hat off. And what we're trying to actually say is, if you owned this company, what decisions should we make to help it be most effective? Not what's best for the people that report to you or for the finance department or what's best for marketing. We're going to hold this business in tension and debate around the best decisions we can make to drive the business forward, knowing and trusting that when we do that, that actually helps all of us independently and our teams that we lead help us be successful.
Incredible advice. Now, two of the, I would say, less talked about layers in the Lencioni model are accountability and commitment. Yet they are the things that make the needle move. What do you think about in terms of coordination? What does it cost a company when people leave the meeting just nodding that they will, but are actually not committed?
Oh my gosh, it creates so much waste and so much slowness inside of companies. And I can tell now, having led this and experienced this so many times, when people walk away with open loops in a meeting or without having conflict around the decisions that are being made and really committing to them, you're just going to come back next week and things are going to be in probably exactly the same place they are now. And when you stack 1 week is okay, when you stack week after week after week of that happening, where half the things happen, half the things don't happen, and we can't actually even hold people accountable because no one committed in the first place. And so you can say, hey, why didn't this thing happen this week? And it's like someone says, well, I didn't know that we were really saying we were doing that this week. Versus when the meeting drives to a place of everyone saying, okay, this is the decision. We're going to go implement this with every bit of effort that we have. Is everyone good with this decision? Can we say yes to that? When you drive out of meetings that way, it's amazing. I mean, really, that's where you can get 3-4 times the amount of good things done as another team that doesn't have that. Even if you have subpar players, you could take a team of A+ players that are technical specialists and so good at so many different things. And if they can't have a clear decision they're committing to, they're not not going to get near the amount of results as C-level players that just are clear and committed to doing something. Because who knows? I mean, at the end of the day, we don't know what the future holds. What I do know is that if we don't make clear decisions and try, we're definitely not going to get results. Even if we make a B- decision and try, we're going to get at least B- results, which is better than nothing. And if we do that time after time, we'll probably learn what we need to come back and make better decisions from there. And so committing, moving forward, I think there's this whole category that I love around like that it would just ship it, around the idea of like get to a certain percentage point of confidence and just do the thing. Let the results tell you if it's working or not, even sometimes more than your intuition. And if teams can't commit to decisions like that, and then ultimately if they don't commit, they can't hold each other accountable, then they move so much slower, and it's so frustrating. And you're just watching people. This is where they go to meetings after and they say like, we're not doing this, right? Like, or intuitively to them, that thing lives inside of a parking lot, even though it sounded like a clear decision, because they're going to make the leader say it 3 or 4 more times before they're like, oh, maybe this really is a decision that we're going to implement. And then you're just behind the 8 ball all the time.
Yeah, I don't know if that's sort of like a sign of trauma as well. Like, the leader says one thing and then the leader says another thing in the next meeting and the third thing. And, if there isn't cadence to follow through, like you said, like it's relatively small things that are required for changing that culture. And it starts from the top, obviously.
Oh, man, I found that often the problem with this, 99% of the time, the problem is not the team that reports to that principal leader or founder. The problem is that the founder hasn't been clear about decisions or held people accountable to some of the decisions, and then some of them just rolled off so that they didn't have to experience the accountability of, you said we were going to work on something this week and it turned out to be something that was pointless even to you. Like this was just the flavor of the day that you told us that we were supposed to pay attention to. And what ends up needing to happen, a lot of it, is that the team has to actually have enough kind of a healing experience that we are going to make decisions and we are going to implement those decisions and be held accountable to them. They need enough reps to know that they're not wasting their time and energy if they say yes to that and then they go actually make it happen. Because it's so frustrating being told, this is what matters now and this is success and priority for you. And then a week later you come back and no one's even, you've done all this work and then the founder forgets it was even something they said. You're like, I'm not going to put my time and energy towards something anymore until you say it 4 or 5 times. That playbook makes sense. So that has to be a shift in the team's experience of the leadership of the founder before it is a team just deciding they're going to be more involved in commitment.
I have to confess that I feel incredibly guilty for doing those things. So I'm sure there's other founders as well who feel that way. And it might be that the dysfunction is difficult to see when you're inside of the hurricane. What would be your advice? What's one honest test that they can do to see what's happening? Like what would you have them do?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the one practical thing that helps the most with this, and especially inside of commitment and accountability, is take the last 10 minutes of your weekly meeting. Almost everyone has some form of a weekly or biweekly meeting that they talk about the projects that are up in the air right now or the plates that are spinning. Take the last 10 minutes and do an end of meeting discipline where we're going to not talk about any new work, no more agenda items. We're going to write down what decisions did we make today and who's going to do what by when to carry those decisions forward. And if you can do that in the last 10 minutes, multiple things can happen. You can realize we talked about a lot of things. We didn't make any decisions. So what was the point of that meeting today? If it was not closing loops and giving people the clarity they need to move forward. So that can be a clarity point. Or you can actually track those decisions and actually go around and in COVID times, when I wasn't sure if my business was going to be viable or not anymore, when that hit, and I was a first-time CEO, we started using this technique that one of my mentors told me called kind of fist of 5. And it was this idea of without having to talk about it, I think this is the decision we can make. Are you a 1 or a 5 on that? 5 is, I think this is the best decision in the world. 1 is, I think this is going to fold the business down. Where are you on this decision right now? And you can get a sense really quick. But what we could do is get to that kind of vote and then get to clarity around, okay, we're going to make this call this week. That's getting written down. And you can, and actually asking someone for commitment and saying, okay, that's yours to own. What questions do you have? What concerns do you have? Because this time next week, we're going to come back around and say, where are we with that? So now's your chance. And so I think that end of meeting discipline, last 10 minutes, what decisions do we make? Who's going to do what by when with those decisions can be one of the most powerful ways to check yourself as a founder, but then also help teams implement.
incredible advice. Craig David Denison, where can people reach out to you to find out more?
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Man, I think the best place is probably LinkedIn. And so you can just Google or look on LinkedIn, Craig Denison and Green Thumb Consulting. We're trying to get more content out there. Like we're busy with a lot of good retainer projects. And so the thing I'm trying to do right now is put some more stuff out into the ether that hopefully helps founders that might not be able to afford the work or might not, or if we don't have capacity or time or whatever it is. And so connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm also making space more and more to like just jump into a Zoom call with people because this is so interesting to me and I love this work so much. And so that's like free. And so if people have questions and they're like, if we can do a 1 hour sort of like debrief and diagnostic around where their business is, I'll do that all day, every day. Like I'll show up at 5 a.m. and do that because it's just fun, energizing things for me to do in the midst of retainer work. And so probably LinkedIn, best place to connect with me.
There you go. This has been the Coordination Tax with Craig Denison. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Christian.